Standing ovation. Haven't even said a word yet. Southern hospitality. I want to first of all thank your mayor here. He's a person I've got a chance to meet briefly, but he's doing a fine job, for Little Rock. And my job as mayor is to go out around the country and talk to other mayors that are doing good work and bring back all the things they're doing right and the things they aren't doing as well. We'll keep them in those particular cities. So, Mark, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for choosing to be a public servant in this community. And I know Little Rock is very lucky to have you here. I also want to thank Dean Rutherford for the role you're playing. I mean, this is, again, the ultimate person who's given his whole life to community service after a certain point. And I think every city needs a Skip Rutherford in their town. So I've got to find somebody like you in Sacramento. If you got any cousins out there in California, I'm going to recruit them up to Northern California. And then I got a chance to meet a couple of elected officials here, and want to thank them both for coming out as well. I don't know if you know this. How many of you knew I played in the NBA? Raise your hand. Most of you? I can't take that for granted nowadays. All right, okay. How many people are students of the Clinton School of Public Service? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people are from Little Rock? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people are from the business community? Raise your hand. Okay. How many work in the public sector? Raise your hand. And how many people are part of a faith-based or community-based organization? All right, so this is a very diverse and very well cross-represented group of people here. So, my remarks are not going to be long, because what I'd really like to do is kind of hear from you as well. Let me just make one connection, though. Do you guys remember Keith Jackson? A legend in this community. Oliver Miller, Joe Klein. These are all guys that were professional athletes in my time. I played with Oliver Miller. I played with Joe Klein. Just talked to him on the phone a few minutes ago. And then Keith Jackson held a fundraiser and had a community organization. I think it was called The Park or something. Is that still going on out here? So back in the mid-'90s when he was first starting that, he got athletes from all over the country to come to Little Rock and participate in a nonprofit. I think it was a basketball game or something like that at the time. And I have always had a special affinity for Little Rock. And not to mention, y'all gave me a standing ovation. So it's a very special place. Let me start with this. President Clinton is somebody I admired for many years. And in 2000, I retired from the NBA. And when I retired, there were different people I wanted to ask their advice on what they thought I should do when it came to transitioning from sports. And President Clinton invited me back to the White House. I was actually in the Oval Office. That was a big deal. Like, for real, I was in the Oval Office, and just me and President Clinton. I had like a one-on-one, and I just wanted time to stop, and I wanted the cameraman to take a picture to prove that I was in the Oval Office with President Clinton with no security, just me and President Clinton. So he's like, how can I help you? I forgot. I was just in awe, being in the Oval Office. So, but I did ask him. I asked him, should I run for an elected office back in 2000? And what President Clinton told me was somewhat, not so much unique, but surprising. He said, you should not do it unless you're called to do it. You should not do it unless you have a fire burning in the belly. And at that point in time, I had not been called to do it, and I certainly didn't have a fire burning, so I didn't run for elected office at that point. A quick history. I grew up in Sacramento. I was a third-generation Sacramentan. I went to public school my whole life. I went to University of California on a basketball scholarship. I majored in political science, and then I played 12 years in the NBA and retired in 2000. And in 2000, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, in Arizona, they were trying to get me to run for senator, Congress, and governor. And that was partly why I went to talk to President Clinton. Like, is it worth it? You know what I mean? Basically, I mean, all that you had to go through and endure, is it worth it? And he said, it's definitely worth it, but you have to be called to do it, and you have to have a fire in the belly. I didn't have either of those at that point. So what I ended up doing is starting charter schools. And we run charter schools in Sacramento. We opened a charter school in New York. And all this dovetails into my political arena. So as a mayor, no different than your mayor here, public safety a top priority, education a top priority, economic development, job creation a top priority, effective government as it relates to integrity and efficiencies and streamlining processes and making sure that your government serves you as people are priorities. And then a priority I have that might be a little different than other cities is we want to make Sacramento a destination city, a world-class destination city. Sacramento is the state capital of California, and California is the 7th largest economy in the world. And most people in California don't even know where Sacramento is. So we've got to do a better job of elevating the profile of the city of Sacramento, certainly getting more visibility and making people proud and giving you folks a reason to want to come and visit Sacramento. We do not have a Clinton library. We do not have a Clinton School of Public Service. We have one river. You guys have one river. We have two rivers. We have a state capitol. So we have a lot of things that are attractive to people to come to our community. So we're trying to elevate the profile of the city of Sacramento. So what I want to do today is you guys get a host of speakers who come through. And this is very unique to see such a cross-representation of people coming to hear a speaker from, 2,000 or 3,000 miles away. It is basketball season. Somebody mentioned that. And, you had to peel me away from the playoffs. And I'm going to get this out of the way now. I'm rooting for the Lakers. And I'm rooting for the Lakers to play Cleveland because I want to see Kobe Bryant and LeBron clash in the finals. I could care less about either team. I just want to see those two battle each other and let them determine who the best player is in the ring together. So I wanted to get that out of the way. I know that would be a question a little later. And then the other question I'm going to get out of the way now. If Charles Barkley runs for governor of Alabama, Lord help Alabama. Now, there's a lot of things Charles does well. He's entertaining. He says what's on his mind. But governing the state of Alabama, I do not necessarily think would be good news for the citizens of Alabama. Now, Alabama has made a lot of progress. I'd hate to see Alabama take some step backwards. In all seriousness, Charles is a great guy, and when I decided to run for mayor, the first two phone calls I got, Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, saying, what can I do to help? And they came out and they did fundraisers for me and they spoke and they were surrogates. And that's part of the collegial fraternity of players who played in the NBA. They support and do anything they can to help people they played against or promote the NBA. And again, God help Alabama if Charles decides to run. I want to tell you a couple quick stories, and it's going to dovetail into why I think public service is important. So when I played in the NBA, I played 12 years, and I got a chance to visit cities, 29 cities all over the NBA. And what I would do when I would go into each NBA city is I didn't just want to play basketball and see the inside of a gym. I wanted to go out and meet people and see neighborhoods and see what makes the United States fabric so great, which are all these great cities all over the country. They all have their unique, distinguished features, and people and cities and geography were something I was interested in. So my first would be to the group in here today is you're going to need bipartisan support to do anything. Those days are done when it's all about a Democrat or a Republican. You've got to have bipartisan commitment to get anything done. And any leader who gets that is a leader that I would probably support because no Democrat has all the right answers and no Republican has all the right answers. And those in between are very important. And I think President Clinton did a great job as a new Democrat of being moderate and moving the Democratic Party more to the middle where you can reach across both sides of the aisle. And I'm going to show you how it was important to me and how my NBA days connected to that. Education is very important to me. I grew up in a poor neighborhood. I grew up lucky enough to have, my father drowned when I was 3 years old. So my mom had me at 16 years old. She was a single parent. You know, the great American story. You can make your own destiny with hard work and a lot of influential people in your lives, but education is supposed to be the great equalizer. And there are many cities and many public schools around this country that are not serving our public children to the degree that they should. And Arkansas, you know, again, we want to give Arkansas a lot of credit for balancing their budget, and certainly the city of Little Rock, but Arkansas is challenged when it comes to its public schools as well. And we've got to make sure that every kid, no matter the neighborhood they live in, the zip code, the color of their skin, have access to a high quality education, and that's not happening in America. So again, back in the early 90s, because the education was very important to me, I got a chance to sit down with Senator Ted Kennedy. This is the early 90s. And you know, there's no stronger Democrat than the Kennedy legend and Ted Kennedy, and I'm in the office of Ted Kennedy, and I'm thinking, man, I've come a long way from little Sacramento, talking to Senator Kennedy, and you know, I get starstruck. You know, I must admit, forgot what I was supposed to ask President Clinton when I was in the Oval. Did I tell you I was in the Oval Office? So as I'm talking to Ted Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, I'm thinking, man, John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Ted Kennedy and the Shrivers, and God, how amazing is that? And oh yeah, what was I here for? So I asked him, I said, you know, he was very involved in the education committee. And I asked him, did he support charter schools? Or did he believe in charter schools? Probably 93, 94. And, you know, he said, you know, charter schools are new, and I don't know a whole lot about charter schools. And I was thinking to myself, like, if we don't know a whole lot about charter schools and our education system is not serving our young people well, what's the solution? Like, what are we going to do? How can we improve our public schools? And, you know, he basically said to me very honestly, said, I don't know what that answer is yet, and yes, we've got to do better by our children. And he didn't know what the answer was. So I walked away kind of scratching my head like, golly, what are we going to do to improve public schools in our country? A few years later, I was in Washington, D.C., and I got a chance to meet Justice Clarence Thomas. Now, is this being taped? Okay, let me reword what I was about to say here. So I got a chance to meet Justice Thomas, and he and I didn't have a whole lot in common other than the color of our skin. You know, politically, I didn't agree with anything that Justice Thomas espoused or said or stood for. So I get a chance to meet him. He took me in as a meeting, and I spent about an hour and a half with Justice Thomas, and I posed the same question to him. I asked him, you know, did he believe in charter schools, and what did he think about the state of education in our country? And he said something very interesting to me. He said that he got real serious, and I don't know if you've ever heard him speak. He's got a deep, barely voice, and certainly a deep laughter and all that, but I mean, he's a justice, and got very serious. He said, look, I support charter schools. I support schools that work. I will support anything, because if I was a single parent and had a fourth grader that did not have a choice and was forced to go to a bad, failing public school, I would go to jail on behalf of my daughter to make sure she had access to great public schools. And charter schools are public. And I remember leaving there thinking, you got Senator Kennedy as liberal on one side, and you got Justice Thomas as conservative on the other, and I'm a Democrat, and I thought all the answers would come out of the Democratic Party, and I realized at that point in time, you cannot be defined solely by your party. And even if you don't agree with people, you need to sit down with people you don't agree with. You need to listen to them, and you need to hear them out. And you may walk away realizing you have a little bit more in common with a person that you thought you did prior to that meeting. And that was very important for me, and that's certainly part of how I'm running as a mayor of Sacramento, it's not about Democrats, it's not about Republicans. I want people who are going to get results. I want people who have a track record for fighting for little people. I want people who are willing to stand up for those who are less fortunate, regardless of their political affiliation. So my first message today is bipartisanship is important, and I would encourage everyone to sit down with somebody who doesn't look like you, sit down with somebody who might have a different political affiliation, sit down with somebody who has a different industry or a different focus or passion than you do, because that's what makes America great, the differences of all of us. Let that be our strength, not our weakness. So that was in terms of how basketball allowed me to sit down with Senator Kennedy and Justice Thomas. The other question I'm going to get out of the way here real quick is who the hardest person for me to guard was. And is Mrs. Fisher here? She's going to try to make it today. Derek Fisher is a person I'm a huge fan of, but he was not the hardest person for me to guard, for the record. In fact, he was quite easy for me to guard when you think about having to guard Michael Jordan. I shouldn't say trying to guard Michael Jordan. And I'm going to just tell you, the most scariest moment in my life is when I scored on Michael Jordan, and we were running the other way, and he said, "Scotty, give me the ball when we get down on the other end of the court." And he had that look in his eye. You know, that look like, y'all haven't seen this look. It's that look where, and Scotty said, yes, MJ, I'll get you the ball. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we're on national TV. What did I do? Why did I score? Why didn't I pass it to Charles and let somebody else? And y'all know, you've heard this, that things sometimes happen in slow motion. I can remember this as if it happened like 2 minutes ago. And we crossed half court. And Michael Jordan got where the free throw line was and extended. And Scottie Pippen in that triangle offense passed Michael Jordan the ball. And he had that look. I'm looking for all my teammates to help me. And Michael Jordan got the ball in his hands, and he did this. He looked at all his teammates, and he said, that meant clear out. That means I'm not passing. That means I'm about to posterize. Y'all know what posterize means? That means I'm not only going to score on this guy, I'm going to dunk and have this person in my highlight reel. So the hardest person for me to try to guard was Michael Jordan. The biggest mistake I made is I scored on him, and I felt good about myself. And you don't need me to tell you what happened on that end of the court. That right there wakes me up at night, still today. The terror of Michael Jordan telling all his teammates to clear out. So wanted to get that out so y'all wouldn't have to ask me that later. I'm learning in politics, if you know what the bad questions are, you might as well get them out early, then they can't ask you later. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly, and I'm working my way to service really, that one of the most influential people in my life was my grandfather. And, you know, he taught me that you can be a simple person, not have a lot of name recognition, work hard, hold your job, take care of your family. There's nothing greater than doing that. Having a job with decent wages, benefits, retirement, owning your home, living right, serving your God. There's so many Americans that do that don't get name recognition, or they don't get their names in the lights. But the biggest influence in my life was my grandfather. And there were two things that he did that stood out, and it's why I'm a public servant today. We didn't have a whole lot of money. And my father passed away when I was 3, so my grandfather stepped in as, he basically pinched hit for my father and stepped in for my father. And here's what he did. Every time somebody was pulled over on the side of the road when they ran out of gas or had a flat tire, y'all get flat tires in Little Rock? Y'all have people run out of gas in Little Rock? My grandfather was one of those people that would always pull over and help people. And as a kid, you're like, we don't need it. We don't know those people. Like, why we always got to pull over and help people we don't know? I'm trying to get to the Little League game, or I'm trying to get somewhere, bowling or whatever it happened to be. And I mean, literally, we probably pulled over about 50 times as a young kid to help people on the side of the road. So one time we were coming back to Sacramento. We had been out kind of middle of a rural area, kind of like Little Rock, but in California. We were coming back into the major urban city, and I saw this car pulled over on the side of the road. So I thought I could trick my grandfather. I asked him, like, what bird was flying on the other side? And he looked at it and he said, yeah, I think that's a blue jay. And we were swerving. And I was like, how in the world did he see that car? And he had peripheral vision. So as a point guard, I needed to have peripheral vision to be able to see my teammates and make sure they were open. So I learned that from my grandfather. But what I also learned from him is how important it is to be a good neighbor when it's not convenient. It is easy to help somebody when things are good, you got extra time. But being a good neighbor when it's not convenient, that is the true test of service and giving back to a community. And if you think about our country today, that is why everyone in here, especially those who are part of the Clinton School of Public Service, when you have a down economy and when you have such trying times, it is not convenient, but that is when you have to volunteer. That is when you have to give a little extra if you can. That's when you have to feed somebody who's homeless. That's when you have to go out of your way to help somebody or do something if you have a little extra. If you don't, then hopefully somebody will do it for you. And if this is the challenge for your mayor to activate people in Little Rock, I can already see it working, it's happening. It's certainly what we're trying to do in Sacramento. And my grandfather exhibited that better than anybody I ever knew. And the other quick story on my grandfather. When I was 6 years old, we would go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. He woke me up one night at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, woke me up. I thought he was crazy waking me up. Told me to get in the car and we were going for a ride. I'm thinking, going for a ride at 11 o'clock? I got school the next morning. We ride, which again seemed like about a 20-hour ride, but it was probably as far as Little Rock to North Little Rock. But when you're a kid, geography seems expansive. And we pull up to the projects. I don't know, do you guys have projects? Like section? Y'all got projects out in Little Rock? All right, so in Sacramento, we pull up to the projects, and my grandfather hands me $20. And he told me to go knock on apartment 2C. So I go up. $20 is a lot. $20 is like a $2,000 bill. You know, when you're growing up poor, he like gave us a $20. I'm like, I don't have all the toys that I want. Why am I going to take $20 and go give it to somebody who answers the door at 2C? Anyway, so I knock on the door at 2C. A lady opens the door. I look up at her. She looks down at me. I hand her the $20. She starts crying. I run back in the car, get in the car, and my grandfather, I look at him again like he's crazy. He puts the car in reverse, doesn't say a word, takes me home, tucks me in bed. I wake up the next morning and say, did I just dream that he woke me up at 11 o'clock at night and then we went into the projects that were unsafe and that we gave away a $2,000 bill to somebody we didn't know? So he didn't even tell me. I forgot about it. 2 or 3 years later, I asked my grandmother, I said, do you remember 2 or 3 years ago when Grant woke me up and we gave away a $2,000 bill to some stranger? She said, yeah, I remember. I said, why did we do that? She said, I don't know if you remember, but it was around the Christmas season, and it was 2 days before Christmas. This lady was a single parent, had 6 children. 2 days before, her house had been robbed and burglarized and burned, so all the presents that she had for her children had been burned away and stolen. And back in those days, the news station, like the 10 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news, could actually tell where somebody's address was. And my grandfather was woken up by my grandmother and said, hey, we need to go contribute. So we gave away a $2,000 bill to someone we didn't know because it was the holiday season. And the reason why the lady cried is because the generosity of somebody who she didn't even know to help replenish some of the gifts that had been taken away from her children. That may not seem like a big act, but as a kid growing up, it instilled in me a commitment to serve my community forever and to give back when I have an opportunity. That's what your mayor does. That's what your elected officials do. That's what your dean is doing. That's what President Clinton is doing with the School of Public Service. It's what each of you have a chance to do every day, and I know most of you are doing it. I want to encourage you to continue to give and give back and help out, because you have no idea the impact it will have on the young person that you influence, on the person that you're giving, and I can assure you, you're always going to get more in return than you give. That is a guarantee. So my two messages today: one, bipartisanship, and two, give when it's not convenient. A good neighbor is about giving when it's not convenient, and that is critical. And the last thing I want to share with you, and then I think we'll open it up to questions. I don't know how long I was supposed to talk. How long, who's, Dean, you're the boss. How long was I really supposed to talk? He said, as long as you're telling good stories, keep talking. What's my third point? This is my challenge. This is personal. And this is a help all the elected officials as well. I would ask you, there's a quote I wrote down, and I want to give this quote to you. Hell, you know, the place hopefully we all avoid going to. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. I'm going to repeat that again. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. Don't stand on a fence. Take a side. Stand up for what you believe. Have courage. It's okay not to be popular. It's okay to stand on something that maybe everyone doesn't agree with if it's what you agree with. The worst thing we can do is be lukewarm or neutral or flip-flop and be wishy-washy and standing on a fence. That's what I would ask. Whether you agree with me or disagree, or whether you agree or disagree with the mayor of Little Rock here, take a stand for what you believe. Do not remain neutral. That is where hottest places in hell are reserved. Have backbone, courage, stand-up leadership. That's what this country needs. It's what your state needs. It's what your cities need. It's what your neighborhoods need. And you have a chance in Little Rock to do this in a real significant way. I will tell you, people are watching what's happening in Little Rock. You know, you guys might be looked at as a small city that doesn't get a lot of attention. People are watching what's happening in Little Rock. So continue to be good leaders, stand on what you believe, bipartisanship, reach out to people who don't look like you or maybe have the same political affiliation. Be good neighbors when it's not convenient, especially in these darn times here, and you guys will do Little Rock quite well. So that ends my remarks. I'm glad for any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Let's wait till we get people positioned with microphones. As I call you, just wait till you get the microphone that's laid right here.
Who grew up 24 miles from Sacramento.
You grew up where?
Dixon. I'm happy to see that Sacramento had the wisdom to elect such a wonderful mayor.
Thank you.
My question is, do you think it makes it more, less, or does it have any impact on your being a mayor that Sacramento is a capital city?
So thank you. Dixon is, again, probably just as far as North Little Rock is from Little Rock. So certainly appreciate you being from Dixon. Now, are you living in Little Rock? How did we lose you? Now, sorry, Mayor. We have to recruit you back. So to her point, is Sacramento's the capital city. That we get a double whammy when there's a bad economy. All cities are struggling to balance their budget. Revenues are down. You know, sales tax revenue and property taxes are down. Your expenses are still where they are because you're trying to preserve public safety and parks and education and all the things that are very important, which we know. So that is a challenge like every mayor in every city is facing around the country. A double whammy in California because we're a capital city. So because the state can't balance their budget, revenue doesn't come to the cities like it should in a state capital. Number two, the state is looking at borrowing our property taxes to balance their budget, and we are not going to let that happen. And then lastly, because Sacramento is a government town, when the state lays off workers, it impacts Sacramento more so. Or if the state furloughs workers, meaning workers work 1 less day a month or 2 less days a month, that means they're not coming downtown, they're not shopping at our restaurants or retail places. That's why we get a double whammy. So it is much harder being a capital city for the state of California. And the state has a lot of dignitaries that come in on a regular basis. So our police officers, our public safety folks have to help out the state, and we're already under-resourced, but we have a responsibility to help the state out, and we don't get anything in return. So as a mayor, I'm trying to figure out how I can maybe get a line item from the state to the city of Sacramento to help offset our inconvenience that they cause us in many cases. So yes.
Further questions? Yes, ma'am, right here on this row, right here on the front row, right up here. No, Caroline, right? Yeah, she had her hand up.
Hello. I am involved in charter schools. I was involved in schools in Tennessee and now a new charter in Little Rock. And I wanted to know more about your experience with charter schools, some of the things you did best, and then some of the things you might have done differently.
So I'm going to tell you, and the dean can attest to this as well. We have a president right now, and President Barack Obama. I didn't even mention that in my remarks because I knew it would come up at some point. But I am more hopeful today than I've ever been when it comes to education. He is committed to making sure that adult issues do not rule the day. It's got to be what's in the best interest of children. It has to be. And he's committed. His Secretary of Education is a guy named Arnie Duncan, who's from Chicago, which some of you may or may not know. But they know that charter schools have to be a part of the solution. They're not a panacea. Charter schools are not going to fix every problem. They're not the magic bullet, but they're one of many things that we should be looking at. Who would not want competition and choice? Those are not bad words, and we have to understand that. So what we've done well, and this is for any school, it would work, public school, charter school, if you got to have longer school days. That if kids are behind, there's only one way they're going to catch up. You got to have longer school days. You got to have year-round school. You got to put more time on. We're competing globally with other countries. They put in, some crazy amount of more time in a given school year than we do. That's not acceptable. So not just for our children, but if we're going to be a great country again when it comes to education and competing globally. Number two, you have to have high expectations. You have to believe that every kid, no matter the color of their skin, the zip code, where they live in, what they look like, can go to college, that can excel. And if you do not believe that, that teacher should not be teaching in schools. I just don't believe that.
Okay, question? Yes,
Dean,
ma'am.
Dean,
Are you finished?
This is my education here.
Oh.
Can I have the latitude to?
Mayor, you can have all the latitude you need.
Number three, you have to have quality teachers. And teachers need to be esteemed, they need to be appreciated, they need to be rewarded, they need to be incentivized. I'm a big believer of performance and merit pay. Teachers perform, give them even extra. If teachers aren't performing, you give them professional development, and hopefully that will put them in a position to be an effective teacher. And if teachers consistently aren't performing, then you can't teach in the classroom. Because our children, you just can't do it.
We have a question right here.
Everything that you've just mentioned has to do with what's happening with the Harlem School in New York and the success rates. I would wonder, with, as you're saying, education being the great equalizer, why are we not patterning? Why are we not using that as a pattern? What's happening with the charter schools at the Harlem School in New York should be the pattern for public schools because of all the things that you just mentioned. Why are we not doing that? What is the results? When do we go to a results-based initiative?
I think very good question. Again, I'm elected mayor, and when I talk about courage, I've got to say what I believe. I think that there's oftentimes not the political will that teachers union, not teachers. Teachers, man, nobody works harder than teachers, but the teachers union sometimes, they're an impediment for getting to where we need to be. And I think all that's changing. I think the whole landscape in education is changing. And how far is Helena? Is Helena in Arkansas? Or Helen? What's Helena? Or what is it called? Helen or Helena? There's a great charter school in Helena, a KIPP charter school in Helena, anybody who's interested in education, I mean, an incredible charter school. So the reason why we haven't been doing it in the past is because we've been letting politics and adult issues getting in the way. And right now, we've got to say that nothing is more important than our children. And all of you can do your part to make sure that kids are performing. And data and accountability is going to be very important. One of the things that's very challenging, and again, to normal parents, it's hard to determine whether their schools are successful or not. Like in California, you have something called the API, Academic Performance Index. And if you get a 700 or a 680, people don't know what that means. It's too confusing. One of the things I'm working on as mayor of Sacramento is, can I do an initiative where every school gets a letter grade? You get an A, you get a B, you get a C, you get a D, or you get an F. Every parent, no parent's going to want to send their kid to a school that's getting an F or a D. Now, some parent may say, I'm going to send my kid to a school that's getting a C+ if it was an F a year ago and it's made progress and improved because they have new teachers and right principal and those kind of things in place. And no parent's probably going to want to send their kid to a school that's getting a B- if it was an A year before. So we have to make things transparent so that parents are informed and have the ability to make those decisions.
City Director Keck has a question over here.
Thank you, Mayor. In your short time in office, how have you accessed the resources that are available in nonprofits and faith-based organizations to meet the challenges in your city?
Very good question. Are you the city,
City Director.
what's the director mean?
City council person. I work with the mayor.
So you interact with the council members? Or
Beg your pardon? No, I work on the city council. One of the elected officials here
I
in
got
Little
you.
Rock.
Okay.
I work with the mayor
Great.
most of the time.
So, one of the big opportunities here that we have is how do you leverage private assets for the good of the public? And there are many public-private partnerships, and we have to figure out ways to do that. And that's a challenge for each of us, but that is what's going to happen going forward. Public and private partnerships are so darn important. And I'm going to just give you two initiatives that we've done. One, as a mayor of the city of Sacramento, how many staff, do you have a strong mayor structure or a weak mayor structure? City manager, so weak mayor structure. So, we have that in Sacramento as well. So I only have a staff of 4 people, whereas most mayors have staffs of 25 and 30 people that directly report to them. I have a staff of 4 people. So what I had to do was, how do I get more capacity? And one of our big issues that we had was volunteerism. So I raised money from, you guys have Tyson Food, is that out here? So like a Tyson Food and what are the other, Walmart. I may have to stay another day out here. Dean, can you get us a meeting with Walmart?
Make that happen, Mayor, if you want to stay.
But like Walmart and those corporations and businesses, I got them to contribute about $150,000 so we could hire 2 people for 2 years to run a volunteer initiative. And that volunteer initiative, our goal is to be the #1 city when it comes to service hours in the state of California. So now we've got this whole initiative citywide where every citizen is committed to trying to do 10 hours of community service. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not been able to raise some private dollars for the good of the public. And we also did the same thing on a homeless initiative. And I am proud to say that Walmart, the Walmart Foundation, gave $25,000. We have Walmarts obviously in the city of Sacramento, but they gave $25,000 to our homeless initiative as well, so I could hire a person and they drive that initiative because we didn't have the capacity. So very important, and we have to be as creative and as innovative as we possibly can.
Got a question. Let's see. I think this lady right here has had her hand up a long time. Yes.
We're visiting from Phoenix, Arizona, and it's interesting to see you without big drops of sweat coming off of your head. But what I wanted to know is, what is your relationship with the governor? Is he supportive? Because he has so much to do and so much in debt. I'm just wondering how you got along with him.
Let me give you a little backdrop on the governor. I think most people know our governor is a gentleman named Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, he's a Republican, and he got elected because there was a recall. So the former governor, Governor Davis, got recalled, and Governor Schwarzenegger came in and finished his term and then got reelected. And he is not popular right now, and there was a book out that was titled, He's a Party of One, like a political party of one. He's a Republican, so the Democrats don't necessarily embrace him. And because he's a moderate, in the middle of the road Republican, the Republicans don't embrace him. That's a sad state, that you got a guy who's trying to work on both sides, and because of that, his base on the Republican side are not supportive of him, and Democrats aren't going to give him too much credit because he doesn't have a D as opposed to an R. So with that said, I get along very well with him. He's been very supportive of my efforts. I probably have met with him, been in office 170 days, 6 months. I've probably met with him 10 times, more than probably twice a month on something. And the former mayors probably had never even met with the governors, over 20 years or 50 years. And he looks at the city the way I would like him to look at the city. He said it makes sense as a governor to make sure the capital city reflects the best of the state. So did anybody see the homeless, the tent city that was kind of being aired in Sacramento? Anyway, we had some illegal camping from homeless people camping along the river where there's just tents, and these tents have been going on for 10 years. But nobody in the city wanted to deal with it. So Oprah called and said, hey, we want to do a story on homelessness. Do you guys have tent cities? And I said, absolutely. And most people in the city didn't want them to come and do a story on it. I actually did, because I felt like the more visibility it gave that problem, the more political will I would have for people to help solve the problem, because nobody wants to be embarrassed. So all of a sudden, all the city officials were like, okay, we got to find some money. We got to get rid of this problem. And the governor, to his credit, said, I do not want the capital city to be on CNN in Germany and then that negatively reflect California. So the governor and the first lady asked what they could do to help. And this is what you want. You want people working together. And the governor, I'm a huge fan of the governor, and also he's one of those rare individuals. John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, President Clinton, Barack Obama. They have this charisma that's just not normal. Really, they have this ability to connect with people in ways that just most people can't, and Governor Schwarzenegger has that gift as well.
Got one time for one question, and I got to close it with the Helen Thomas of the Clinton School. You're not going to get away here, Mayor, without being questioned by Annie Abrams.
All right, sounds good.
So get ready.
This look. First, I want to thank you for providing this diversity in this audience, in this school of public service. I don't miss coming out here. This is the most diverse audience we have had in the school. Thank you for bringing out the diversity. Secondly, I'm a history buff. Of the 13 Confederate states, Arkansas, one of them, we are the only one that has never had an elected constitutional officer, never had a congressional representative. The times that we have been able to have the diversity of a mayor, Charles Bussey I, Lottie Shackelford, who's buried.
Are you saying
mother.
you never had an African American?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the 2 times we've had a mayor, one a man and one a lady, Lottie Shackelford, who's burying her mother at this hour. I want to know that in a time when Jesse Jackson and others were able to build the bridge that you're standing on, the ministerial alliances of this country were the ones who made it happen. My question is, what do we need to do in the state of Arkansas to move from the bottom of a state that has never had a constitutional officer elected or congressional since Reconstruction? And what is happening with the ministerial alliances in your city of Sacramento? I know the answer to all my questions, but I need you to validate it.
I told you you couldn't leave Arkansas without.
So I did not know that. That's very, telling in a lot of respects. Let me say there's good news. There's an African American president. Once that happens, anything can happen at that point. So, and I am the first African American mayor of the 55 mayors that they've had in Sacramento. And it's a new era. And that era is, you're going to get politicians, and let me say this first, that we all stand on the backs and on the shoulders of all those who have come before us. Little Rock 9. I mean, we stand on the backs of all those people. And many of them weren't here to see the day. I didn't think in my lifetime I would see an African American president. Many of you didn't either. But the neat thing about that, not only have we broken through, we're not done yet, but not only have we broken through, you're having a president that now and is no longer going to be just defined by the color of his skin. He represents all of America. He doesn't represent this constituent group only. He represents black people, African Americans, whatever choice you want to use, Native Americans, the Asian community. He represents white people, Latino, the whole gamut elected this man. And the whole country showed up to the ballot polls for the very first time. We've been engaged like never before because he struck a chord in all of us, not because he was an African American, but because he talked about bipartisanship. He talked about not business as usual. He talked about the best that America could be. He talked about sitting down with his enemies when people said it wasn't popular. He never made personal attacks on people. He wasn't afraid to address the tough issues. All that's going to trickle down to each state and each city, and it's already happening. So I think that's the good news. But you need to make sure that Arkansas does its part of training and finding those young people or those people who've already had a career in one area that may now be interested in serving politically and being an elected official. We serve ourselves well when we have diversity. When we do not have diversity, we lose as a country, we lose as a state, and I think that's what you're getting at. And the faith-based community plays a critical role in every city and every state. I mean, President Obama has just brought a guy in from Colorado to lead a faith-based initiative to make sure that the ministers are playing a critical role and bringing public and private sector together to solve, the problems of our day. So, again, if there's anything I could ever do, I'd be glad to play my role. But again, we want diversity and we want excellence. And hopefully both of those merge where we have good representation, but we never want to strike somebody down because they're not the right color if they're producing the results. But we never want to shut people out and make sure that they have a seat at the table, which I think is very, very critical.